Okay, so today's lesson will be about writing a research paper. The research paper is one of the most important things that you need to know how to do, especially at the university level. Every course you take, you will have to write at least one research paper, probably per semester. So it's really important to know how to do this and do this correctly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be writing a research paper along with you and go through all of the steps that you will have to complete to write the research paper. So initially, when your instructor gives you an assignment to write the research paper, you should have three choices in mind. Think about it a little bit, but come up with three choices that are relevant to you, that are relevant to your interest and or your goals. Okay, so let's just say my professor gave me an assignment. I have to write a research paper. I can write about anything I want. So what are three topics that are of interest to me? So topic number one would be to do a biography research paper on a famous American author, Ambrose Bierce. He spells his last name a little different than I do, but we are distant cousins. So I'd like to learn more about Ambrose Bierce. Another thing I'm interested in that I found over in my travel in Asia was the bonsai trees in Japan. It's the beauty of art and nature together, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about the bonsai tree. And my third choice is in my backyard, I have a stone wall. And I know a little bit about New England history and a little bit about stone walls, but I don't know about my particular stone wall in my backyard. So that might be a research topic that I'd like to do a research paper on. So I have my three choices, and now I'm going to do some initial reading on all three topics and make a final decision. Okay, good morning. Welcome, students. I'm here in my little hometown and wanted to talk to you about a research paper. So this is my project. I have in my yard a beautiful old stone wall. And when I grew up here as a kid, we always just took this for granted. It would always be here. And as you can see, it's very long. You can see my wife down here playing around with her garden. So I wanted to do a research paper about this stone wall. I know they're pretty old, and I'm curious, my questions that I have are, how do they build them? Why did they build them? Really, how old is it? Are there certain people in history that are connected to these stone walls? Of course, we have them all over New England, and it has something to do with boundaries and farming. And I know that this property at one time was part of a big farm. So we've noticed that inside the wall there was extensions on top of the wall to make it higher. So it's been suggested that they grew or raised goats or sheep here on this property many years ago. So as you can see, you guys have your great forest,
have my little mini forest here in my backyard. So my research paper is going to be about stone walls, and I'm curious about who built them, why they were built, how old is it really. As you can see, it needs a lot of work. Okay, so that's the start of my research inquiry questions, and we're going to do it about the stone wall. Okay, so let's take a little walk down here, show you a little more, some of the features. This right here, lots of briars. These are all from the winter storms that come through, and high winds knocks a lot of trees down and branches. You can see our little garden area here. I don't know what this is. This is a meeting place of a bunch of walls here together. It's kind of odd. As you can see, they extend down even further, all the way down to the street. We live off the street quite a ways, so this is kind of a long view of. And this particular wall here extends for probably a half a mile up through the woods, up to the highway, and then on the other side of the highway it continues. So wondering how they, with all these trees and everything in the way, how did they build it? I mean, they didn't have machinery back then. So these are some of the inquiry questions I have on my little stone wall in my backyard that I'm going to turn into a research paper. Okay, that's it for now. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Okay, welcome back. Today we are going to talk about the overall plan for writing a research paper. So some of the topics in this presentation are going to discuss about choosing a topic for your research paper, the use of sources, making inquiry questions, making a hard copy of your materials to highlight and annotate. I'm going to talk more about quoting and in-text citations, some other sources of materials that we have not discussed so far for gathering information, the use of index cards, and I'm going to present some examples of my research, the sources, and make an oral summary of what I've learned so far. And then the final piece will be synthesis. So that's what the next video is going to talk about. And then following that, I'm going to give examples for all of those topics that are on this list here. Okay, welcome back, students. We're continuing our research paper lesson. So before we get started today, let's do a quick review of what we've learned so far. So when your professor assigns you a research paper for your subject, you should think of 3 topics that are of interest to you. Somehow connect to you, you have an interest in it, it's something you really want to research. Don't just do a research paper for the sake of doing the research paper. Have something invested in it for yourself. So we want to take those 3 topic ideas
and do an initial inquiry, some initial research, and you want to focus on one. So choose one. Now, if your professor says you need 3 sources, okay, that's the minimum. If you do 5, you're going to be extra points, extra credit. So don't be afraid of doing more than what is required. Okay, so you have your final choice. You've done your at least 3 sources of information. You've looked into it. Just quickly read through it. Okay, make sure that these are going to answer your initial inquiry questions. It could be something as simple as the 5 WH questions. You can't go wrong with that. Who, what, when, where, why, how. Okay. So you have that material. You've scanned it. You've looked at it. Okay, it does answer my inquiry questions. The next thing you want to do is, if you can, is to print out your sources. Have a hard copy of it. Because at this stage, what we're going to do is we're really going to dig in deep into these source materials. You want to read it closely. You want to be able to highlight and annotate. The same principles that we used in our summary for the eye test, exactly the same thing you want to do. You want to be able to read that material, highlight it, annotate, then write a summary of that source material. Basically, you're going to do that for all 3 of your sources. And this is going to give you the strength materials that you're going to put into your research paper. Okay, so after we've done all of that, something we have to do in a research paper that's different than the argumentative essay that we practice is you have to integrate into your paper quotations from the sources. Exact quotes of what the author has said. Now, that's copying, and that's okay. As long as you give credit to the author for the materials that you're using in your research paper. Put it in quotes. Try to keep it less than 5 sentences. If it's less than 5 sentences, you just put quotes around it. If it's more than 5 sentences, you have to do a special function within the research paper, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, so one of the ideas is that after you have quoted the material on your or in your research paper, at the end of the quote or at the end of the paragraph, in brackets, you need to put either the author's name or possibly the title, if there is no author, of the article or source that you're using. This enables the reader to look back into the last part of your research paper called the bibliography, and we're getting there, as to where you found the information from. So that if they want to research your topic even further, they have sources to go to. And there's a standard format for that. Lucky for you, there are web pages where you just input the title of the book and it will do the citation for you completely. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about what I was able to find through my resources on stone walls. And one thing that we didn't talk about earlier is other sources in addition to Google Scholar. There is a platform in YouTube where you can use or easily find education materials, and that's called YouTube EDU. So what YouTube has done is they've taken all their education resources and put it into a platform called YouTube EDU. And there's a search function there. You just type in your topic, and it will give you a list of YouTube videos that are about your topic idea. Can you use YouTube as a source? Absolutely. There's some really good materials out there already. Again, you do have to quote anything that you use in YouTube that you use directly. And you want to quote the author or the name of the video uh, in your research paper. It's totally fine to do that. Now, why do we need to use sources? Why can't we just write about our topic? Okay. The use of sources makes your research paper stronger because it connects back to other people that have researched your field or are connected to your field in some way. And it just makes your research stronger. All right, so this is what we're going to do is I'm going to tell you a little bit about what I found. And one way to do that is just on these little index cards here. You want to put the name of the source, the author, so it's very easy for you to go back to that original material when you need to. So a couple of things that I found out about these stone walls from my initial inquiry questions is from a text called The History, Science, and Poetry of New England Stone Walls by John Manuel Adroit. And what he talks about is the structure of the wall. How come they're only so high? Why aren't they higher? Well, of course, these are all handmade, hand built by men. Uh, and the height of the stone wall is just about up to your waist. And the reason is if you look at the size of the stones that are used in the wall, they're very heavy. And it's usually stones that are only enough for two men to pick up and place upon the wall. So this is why the height of the walls are only about waist high. He also talks about the addition of fence posting to make the walls a little higher. With it integrates some wood into the wall connected by wire or tree branches, something to make it a little higher. And the reason for this was that these walls were used to keep livestock inside a pasture area. So that is from John Manuel Adroit. The next source I have is called The History and Structure of Stone Walls with Kevin Gardner. And this is a talk that he gave on YouTube from his book called Granite Kiss. And he seems to be a real authority in the field of stone wall building. And he talked about some statistics that I never thought about. And he said that the stone walls in New England and New York, if you added them all up together, how long they were, how many they were, that it would circle the earth 10 times. It's also the same distance as from here to the moon, more than any railroad tracks throughout the whole United States. And his book that he talks about, he's the author and he talks about his own book called Granicus, is one of the most quoted sources for anyone doing research on stone walls. I found another YouTube video with this fellow by the name of Robert Thorsten. He seems to be the big authority on New England stone walls. He again states that the wall height was only up to your waist. And he also talks about the length and amount of stone walls being 250,000 miles for all the stone walls, if you put them together, that are in New England and New York. And that is longer than the Great Wall of China. The next source I received was from a historian named Samuel Dean. And he talks about the history of this town right here called Scituate. And he states that these stone walls were built in 1699, early 1700s. And this wall here, this particular wall here, was a boundary wall between two partnership land grants that were given by the king. So on my side of the wall right here, that was run by a partnership of men who got a grant from the king. They were called the Men of Kent. And on the other side of the wall was a king land grant given to a partnership called the Conohasset Partners. Interesting to note, sideline note, both towns that exist today, Scituate and on the other side of the wall, Cohasset, both use Native American Indian names for their township. Okay, so this particular wall was a border wall between the two King Grant partnerships. So these grants that were given by the king were 100 acres by 100 acres. So in European terms, that would be about 40 hectare-acres. So that was a pretty sizable amount of land. And early on, this was tried to be used for farming, which did prove to be very difficult. And eventually it became, during the late 1700s, early 1800s, a new type of business opportunity came, and that was the raising of the Murano sheep. They were imported from Spain and raised for their wool. Now it's important to note too that both of those king land grant partnerships, these guys did not come here for religious freedom. They came here to make money. They were entrepreneurs, and they were here to invest in agriculture. Also, as you can see, there's lots of trees behind me here. All of this land, 70% of the land in all of New York and New England, was cut down and made into huge pasture land. Eventually, farming didn't ran for maybe 150 years, 200 years, and people found that they could get cheaper land out west with a lot less problems and get into agriculture out there. And so they abandoned these farms here. And over the years, the trees have come back to life. Now, most of the trees that you see in the background here, they're probably about 150 years old, the older ones. Okay, so that was from Samuel Dean and his History of Scituate. Uh, okay, so another academic professor, his name was John Delano, Dr. John Delano. And he wrote a book called The Stone Walls of New York and New England. And again, he talks about the 100 acre by 100 acre square lots, the 250,000 miles of stone walls. So we have um, sources that quote the same thing. Two or more sources that are saying the exact same facts. And there's a special way to do that in your research paper, and we will talk about that later. Okay, so I really liked Delano's source of material. It contained a lot of pictures of how things were done, how these were built. And again, you got to remember that this whole area had no trees. It was all open land. So they would take oxen, which is a big kind of cow, and they'd hook the oxen up to these carts or sleds, fill them up with stones, and a group of men would just walk along and continue to build these stone walls. So he had a lot of pictures of how things were done back in the day. So that really helped to answer my question of how these were built. Okay, so that's kind of the materials that I've put together, and that's called synthesis. Now, synthesis is taking your three sources, putting them all together into one research paper, and that's going to uh, uh, be a synthesis of your ideas and how that is and how that's interpreted by you. Okay, so synthesis is a very important academic term that you need to become aware of. So for this week's lesson, all I want you to do is just take one of your sources and read it, highlight it, annotate it, write me a short paragraph, and I want you to integrate one quote into your paragraph from your source. Now, I've shown you on the PowerPoint how to do that. So follow that model. Just 100, 150 words, not a big deal here. Not asking you to write the whole research paper. Okay, so that's the assignment for today. And that concludes our lesson. If any questions, you can always email me, and we'll talk again next week. And take a look at the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay, so the next thing we want to talk about is where can I gather information for my research paper? I have my initial inquiry questions. Now, what am I going to do? Okay, so one of the good sources for research is Google Scholar. And this really focuses on educational type of research and information more than just general. topics. Another is YouTube EDU. It's a subset of YouTube that has a lot of learning and education and study videos. In addition to those two, we can also use magazine, journal articles, don't forget books, newspapers, film, maybe surveys, or interview a person who is an authority in the field. That's also good quotable material. So there are many, many different avenues of approach to gathering your research. Don't just go to Google and type in your topic. Try to find some other sources. Okay, that's it. Okay, so what we want to do is, if you can, print out the materials that you have gotten from the internet. If you print it out, it just makes it a lot easier to highlight. And again, this goes right back to our summary writing, where we took our reading and we found the most important information, we highlighted it, we did some annotating. Of course, the annotating is just a good reminder to yourself as to why you chose that material. So we want to reread our information again, looking for important facts that we can use to quote within our research paper. And make some sideline notes, some annotating notes to yourself. Whatever it is, it's going to help remind you as to why you thought it was interesting or how you might integrate that into your research paper. So again, it's just a redo of our summary exercises that we prepared for the eye exam. So the same strategies we can use here in rereading our source material. Okay, so the next thing we want to start thinking about is we've gathered our information and we want to reread it again. And we want to find some really important, strong facts within the text that you are going to copy and add to your research paper. Now, these could be short sentences. Try to keep it less than, say, 5 sentences. And you want to state the author's name. Take the copied material from the text and put it in quotations. This tells the reader that this information comes from some other source. This is not your own words, it's somebody else's words. And you have to give credit to the author and to the source from where you got that information from. Now, the reason that we want to add these strong facts or information from other sources is it makes your research paper stronger to show that you can connect your idea with someone else's research. So these are called in-text citations, and there is an example on the right. Take a look at it. It's in quotes. And then at the very end of the quote is some reference to where the material came from. This is going to become important later when we create our bibliography at the end of the research paper, which shows the list of sources that we have used in our paper. Okay, so on this slide here, I've written a paragraph or the beginning of a paragraph where I have quoted some facts that I found. Actually, it was a YouTube video of the author giving a talk on his book called Granite Kiss. So I found some very interesting facts and statistics that I didn't really know about before, but I thought they were interesting enough to add to my research paper. So as you can see in the yellow text, these are the exact words that the author used in his audio presentation of his book. So I have to put that copied material in quotes. Again, this tells the reader that this is not my words, this is someone else's words, and someone who is an authority in the field. So this makes my research paper even stronger. At the end of the quoted material, in brackets, you want to give some reference as to where this information came from. And as this came from a talk about his book called Granite Kiss, this will refer back to our bibliography. In this way, if the reader finds these information interesting or wants to further research it, they know where to go to get that information. Okay, so this is just an example of quoted material with a reference to where this material came from. Okay, so next we want to talk about the bibliography and the title. So first, your last page of your research paper is your bibliography. And that is a list of all of your sources in alphabetical order. And there are very strict format to use for that. And we're going to get into that in the next few slides of how to do that properly. But basically, it lists by the author's last name in alphabetical order and or the title of your article if there is no author, where you got your information from. And again, this is so that your reader who wants to do further research can go find the sources that you found your information in. That's the last page. Okay, now the last thing you want to do is to write your title. And the title should be between 5 but no more than 15 words. And it's really a summary, a completed summary broken down into just a few words. If you know how to use a colon, using a colon in your title is always extra points. Okay, so the very last thing you want to do is write your title. Okay, so from the video you just watched, that shows you the longhand way to do it. So now I'm going to show you some easier ways for you to get that bibliography citations. Sometimes through the Google Scholar, the materials that you get may have a citation already done for you. It's called a suggested or recommended citation. You usually find that at the bottom of the article. So this is one of the articles that I used, that I was able to find on the Google Scholar. And of course, can't show you the whole page. So this is the source material, top of the page. And basically it's an abstract. We talked about abstracts. And it does allow you to download the entire article for free. So just below the abstract, we will find on the next slide where you can find the recommended bibliography citation. Okay, so as you can see at the bottom of the article is a recommended citation. It's circled in red. So all you really have to do is copy and paste this into your bibliography. Now, just make sure that you put it in the right alphabetical order. Okay, so we need to talk about the different kinds of formatting that we use in the research paper. And there are two basic style formats. One is called MLA and the other is called APA. And we're going to be using MLA. And MLA is basically for the arts, humanities, education. And the APA format is for the sciences. So we're going to be using the MLA style. I'm going to take a quick read about that on the picture on this slide. Okay, so first, there are several web pages on the internet that will allow you to create a citation just by sometimes as easy as just putting in the website and it will do everything for you. Sometimes you have to add a few features to it to create it. But one of the better ones that I like to use is called Citation Machine. So if you just click on the URL, it should bring you up to the page that's on this slide. Okay, so the first thing we want to click on is the MLA style format. And we're going to do a website. So click on that. Then you want to click on autofill mode. So what that will do is to try to call up that URL website, and from that input the information for you automatically. So you want to click on autofill, and then in the text box below you want to input the website URL, and then finally you can hit the search for the website button. Okay, so on this slide here, basically you just want to input the URL website into the text box, and then just click on the search website, and hopefully they'll be able to find all the information you need, and you won't have to input any other information. Okay, so after you've done that, on the next page that will come up, it should give you the journal or the article that you have sourced. And if it looks correct to you, just hit select. Sometimes they may give you several other options, so just make sure that it is the one that connects to your source. Okay, so on this page, you'll see this is what they have found. And if everything looks correct to you, you can just click on Final Step. Okay, on this page here, you'll see several text boxes with information that's already put in for you. Now, if there's any blank areas, if there's something you want to add or you've been able to find other information that they couldn't, feel free to add that information in. Once you're satisfied with that, just click on Create Citation. Okay, so what happens with the citation machine is if you have more than one source, you can continue to search for another citation, and it will provide you with the list in the proper alphabetical order for you once you've finished searching all of your citations. So on this page here, this is my bibliography of the research that I did. I found all of these on Citation Machine, with the exception of one that was that journal article that I showed you earlier that had the recommended citation. So that was just a cut and paste. And it basically does most of the work for you. So this is actually the best way to do it, I think, is a single space with a double space in between each citation. It looks cleaner and clearer. Some professors may want you to do double space between everything. I think it just takes up way too much room. If you look at a book for the bibliography, you're going to find it in this single space with a double space in between each citation format. It's just much quicker, easier to read. It looks cleaner. Okay, now, as you can see, the web pages or the YouTube videos that I used as my reference source are all easily clickable so that anyone doing research on the same topic, very easy for them to go to the sources that I used in my research paper. Okay, so the very last thing we want to do is to create the title of our research paper. And it really defines your study. You want it to be about 5 to 15 words in length. And you really want to capture the reader's attention. It's a kind of hook to get the reader to want to read your research paper. So you have to really think about it and be creative and come up with an interesting title for your research paper.